Well, hello. Welcome to another Tell Me a Story, brought to you by the Friends of the Sandwich Town Archives in collaboration with the Sandwich Community TV. My name is Joan Osgood, and I'm a member of the Friends of the Sandwich Town Archives. I'm going to take just a second to let you know, because there's a little confusion about the acronym that we use. You'll see a lot of times we don't say the full name, because it's quite a long name, Friends of the Sandwich Town Archives. A lot of times we use the acronym FOSTA, F-O-S-T-A. So that's sort of, so you understand that, and when you see that, you'll know what it is. Okay, enough of that, let's get cracking. I do want to say that it's August 20th, 2026. You cannot talk about the village of Forestdale without talking about the Burke family. They are synonymous, Forestdale and the Burkes. And so I have with me today, and I'm pleased to have Chuck Burke, one of the family members, to talk about his family and the various memories going back generations that he knows about, that he can tell us, to have us know a little bit more about the village of Forestdale. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you.
Pleased to have you.
Glad to be here.
Well, maybe what we can do is sort of start with that. When did the Burkes arrive in Forestdale? How did that happen?
Well, Great-Grandpa Burke, who was Clayton Burke, who was a boat builder and carpenter, moved to Forestdale in 1898. I think he was going to end up with 7 kids. I think maybe, I don't know how many were born at that time. Yes. One of the reasons he chose Forestdale was that back then, with no base, it was like a road nexus. In other words, you could go to Falmouth, or you could go to Bourne. Of course, you could still go to Mashpee and Barnstable and Sandwich. So he found the house. It was one of the fish homes. So many people in Forestdale were fishers, and bought it from that family, I believe. I don't know exactly who it belonged to. Mm-hmm. And I believe originally he came from Prince Edward Island, and he would come down here. Originally, he came down, my father told me the story. Mm-hmm. He came to Boston with a friend to live here, and find jobs here at least. And the two of them just started walking from Boston down what is now, I think, Route 3A.
Oh my gosh.
And they would just stop at farms and say, do you need someone to work here? So his friend got a job first, then he got a job. And eventually, of course, he married and moved to Sandwich.
To Sandwich.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was the farming aspect that eventually had him leave Prince Edward and migrate down eventually to Sandwich.
I think it was just to find you. He was probably not married at the time.
Yeah.
So I think at that point it was more a case of finding a job as young men in an area where perhaps there was more work than Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, where the family came from, that area.
Because early 1900s.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So he arrived in Forestdale.
Yep.
Was he married at that point?
Yes. When he moved to Forestdale in 1898, my grandfather, Harold Burke, was 3 years old. He was born in 1895. So he had one older brother of those 7 kids, which would have been Uncle Ralph. So Uncle Ralph was probably like 5 or something like that.
Uh-huh.
So, and then the other kids appeared, I think, from then on. And
here, they were born here.
Yeah, they were born
yes.
here, went to the Forestdale School, the old school, which of course is still there. In fact, I asked my grandfather one time, Grandpa was sort of your old New Englander, didn't say a lot. He was a builder like his father.
Yeah.
And I said, well, Grandpa, do you remember anything about the Forestdale School, going to school? And he said, well, I remember one day across the street where Jeannie's Way is now was a field. And it was in the winter, but a skunk came out. So we boys went out in the field and chased the skunk around.
Okay.
Doesn't sound like something I'd want to do, but...
No. Now, of course, people listening to this, Forestdale School might think, the Forestdale School today.
Right.
Where was that Forestdale School?
It's the same old school that's right up there across, kitty corner across from the gas station, right across the street from Jeannie's Way.
Okay, very good.
Yep.
Very good. Okay, so eventually moving here and starting to have the children. Who was his wife?
His wife again, his wife was Nellie Burke. I have trouble sometimes because I grew up being my great-grandmother's, my dad would call him Grandma or Nana.
Yeah.
I have trouble remembering what their real name was, but he was, of course, Clayton Burke, and his wife was Nellie Burke.
Nellie Burke,
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, yes, yeah. So I know that he was a builder. You had shared that with me, a boat builder and a builder.
Yep.
And his son also, that would be your grandfather.
Yes.
What buildings did they build back then? Do we know any of them that are still alive, if you will?
Well, one of them you reminded me about, of course, is the Greenbrier Jam Kitchen,
Oh.
which my great-grandfather built that,
Okay.
along with some other people. And then the house along 6A by the Cranberry Bog, just beyond or just before the Twin Ponds.
Oh, yes, on 6A. Mhm.
Yes, he and a gentleman named Grant Fisher built it. It's a big white house.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yes, and they built that, and from what Dad told me, I think Grant Fisher actually lived in it for a while before they sold it. So I'm not sure if that was an early version of a spec house, because it's pretty big for a spec house back
Yes,
in that time.
with that big porch, the lovely
Right,
porch. Yes.
right.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in Forestdale, you get a lot of the homes, like the first couple of houses as you come into Forestdale, just past Skip Lander's pit.
On the left,
On
yes.
on the right-hand side as you're coming in,
Yeah,
or
coming
coming
in.
toward Mashpee.
Excuse me, yes.
There's two, I think the first three houses were all built by either Great-Grandpa Burke, the first two, and then Grandpa Burke, his son, built the next one. And then as you work your way down the village, Hilda Whitmore's house was built. That's now called Grace's Place. It's part of Camp Good News.
Oh, it is?
Yes. Actually, I have to be, I'm inexact there. Grace's Place was built by my grandfather Burke, the first half, and he lost it in the Depression. He built, but Grandpa did build the next house, which was owned for many years by Hilda Whitmore and is now owned by one of the Crocker families.
Oh, okay.
So, and then they did a lot of building in Camp Good News as well. And around Sandwich, out in South Sandwich, even up and down the Cape sometimes, Sagamore Beach, places like that.
In Sagamore Beach. Now, am I incorrect in thinking that they built the church?
What they actually did is the Forestdale Church used to sit across the street on Route 130 next to the cemetery.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Which was, of course, very common back then. You built a church and a cemetery next to it. But it was just the small original building, which now is the middle of the church building.
Okay.
So in 1954, Nellie Burke donated that 2-acre chunk in that corner across the street. So they built, the church was not on any sort of foundation. It was on, just probably rocks and things like that.
Sure.
So they moved it, they built a foundation across the street and moved it across the street and put an addition on the back of it too at the same time. So that was Grandpa and his brother Charles Burke and his brother Henry Burke, my dad and Malcolm Burke and various other people all helped to do that.
So that church absolutely would not be. The church, the Forestdale Baptist Church, has been very important to your family. Could you talk about that a little, Chuck?
Yeah, they started going, of course, when they moved down, it was a Methodist church.
Oh.
And of course, they live right next door to it, so they started going to church. I still have, I recently was given quite a bit of the notes from like the 1920s that Nellie Burke took because she was the church secretary. And
oh my gosh.
They ended up in custody of my uncle, James Burke. And when Uncle Jim died, his son, Tim Burke, gave me them. And so I've been very slowly working through them.
Let me stop you right there.
Yes.
When you get through them, could the archives have a copy of those? That would be so important.
Sure.
Wonderful.
I don't think we have, no problems there as far as the church goes. I think our pastor Ethan would love to have them at some point.
You'll make sure of that, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of them she mentioned, for example, when they were looking to figure out what denomination the church should continue as or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
She said something like there were 93 people in Forestdale and maybe 2 babies. And they polled them all and they said, what denomination do you think we should be?
Oh, yep.
And at the time it was Methodist, and then it became Northern Baptist, then it became a Conservative Baptist church. And then just a few years ago, we switched to a totally independent. We're not denominational, we're just Christ-centered, Bible-believing, and that's what we do.
I see, yeah, yeah.
And then, interestingly enough, the what is now the office building, which sits at a right angle to the church itself, was bought by the church in 1959 for $1 because it's an old officers' day quarters from the base, and they were getting rid of all the World War II construction. So Alvin Crocker, who was of course very well known in Forestdale,
Yes.
he excavated it all, and they built a foundation and moved the building from the base without too much trouble. I think there were maybe 6 cars following it when it came down 130. That's how minuscule the traffic was.
Yes.
And then they put it up there.
I'll be darned. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. So that has real history also.
It does.
Your father, we're going to be talking about your mom, you know, eventually, certainly, but your father, before he met your mother,
Yep.
in his young years,
Yep.
Growing up in Forestdale, did he share some memories with you about growing up? And could you tell us some of those stories? Because Forestdale looks quite a bit different now.
Yes, it does. And when the first house Dad lived in is what is now Grace's place, the first half of it. And he said one of the things he remembered when he was a kid was, of course, there wasn't a lot of electricity and, again, running water. And that house, my grandfather and grandmother put running water in it. But they didn't have electricity. And the house across the street, which for years was known as the Maples and now has quite a large solar farm behind it.
Oh, yes.
They were summer people, I believe. And he said they ended up trading. They dug trenches across Route 130 and ran water from the Burke's house to those folks so they could have water when they came down. And they ran a line from their storage batteries over to the Burke's house so they could listen to the radio now and then or whatever, you know.
Now tell me, running the pipes, was that the town, or was that the townspeople got together?
No, they just did it. The 2 families just did it.
Yeah, I thought you probably were going to say that.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So Dad, you know, grew up, and of course the Depression hit, and they lost the house, so they moved.
Did they? Yeah.
They did. The bank foreclosed, and
Yeah.
I think Dad said Grandpa, or Mom mentioned, Grandpa might have bought a new Ford Model A, and I don't know if he was able to keep that.
Yeah.
But the house which I now live in, which is at 117 Route 130, a little half house, was owned by my great-grandmother, Grandmother DeLong, and so they were allowed to live there, you know, and so they had a place to live and stay. And eventually, as the family grew up, they bought the house next door, which is no longer there. And of course, then the kids grew up and went off to their various careers, mostly local.
Yes.
But
Yes.
you know, all 3 of the boys served in either World War II or the Korean War.
Your dad did.
My dad and Uncle Malcolm served in World War II, and Uncle Jim served in the Korean War. But
would you name your father's brothers, your father's siblings, please?
yes, it was the next sibling was Ruth Burke,
Yes.
and then it was Malcolm Burke, and then James Burke.
Okay.
And but anyway, growing up, you know, they played games. They liked games like, you know, kick the can or sardines. And I guess I'll delay some of this to talk about Mom and her family because it involved a cooperative effort on all those kids. But of course, Dad, I don't know if you want to get into the Model T thing or anything.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
when Dad was around, he was born in 1920.
Yep.
So around 1934 or so, there was a gentleman out in South Sandwich named Skipper Ewer. And of course, a lot of us know Ewer Road out off, you know, Farmersville. And Skipper had been a Model T mechanic, Dad said, in Detroit for a while.
Wow.
And he had an old Ford Model T. Probably, Dad wrote it down. I have it. I don't have the exact date of it, but it was around in 1919. And he sold it to Dad for $3. So Dad bought it. He was still living in the house where we live now. And in fact, when we moved there, there's still some pieces of it because Dad took the pieces off the back and made like a little pickup, sort of. He spent $2 more on it, and so he had it for $5. He had a car at that point that he could run anywhere, pretty much in Sandwich, because it was all wood roads back then.
Now, how old was he?
I want to say he was around 14 or 15, which would make it 34 or 35.
14 or 15.
Yep.
And he actually worked on the car himself to get
Yes.
it going.
Yep.
And what was it again, Chuck?
I want to say it was about a 1918 Ford Model T.
Ford Model T.
Now,
And-
of course, Skipper, and I'll tell you the story about Skipper.
Oh, yes, please.
Skipper, you were being a mechanic. One time, one of my great-grandparents, it might have been great-grandpa DeLong, he needed a new axle for a Model T that he owned. And so my grandfather's brother, his older brother, Ralph, was coming home in his Ford Model A with a little work trailer down Farmers Hill Road, and there was Skipper going along the road, and Skipper had the axle. He had put a rope around his shoulders and had tied one end to the axle on each side and was just lugging it along, towing it, you know, the 3 miles or so to Forestdale.
An axle.
And Uncle Ralph said to him, "Skipper, would you like a hand?" And he said, old New Englander, "Well, don't know, but I would." So Uncle Ralph got him to Forestdale. But,
Isn't that, yeah.
But Dad, because of the Depression, Dad did have to do a lot of stuff that we would be like to make gasoline money, he had to pick potato bugs for my great-grandfather DeLong next door.
Potato bugs, because
Right.
he had a farm, a potato
Right.
farm? Uh-huh.
So you would take a can of kerosene and you would go along each row and pick the bugs up and drop them in the can of kerosene. And he would make his 15 to 20 cents an hour.
Oh my gosh.
He took care of Great-Grandpa Burke's boats, which were in Peters Pond. He had a sign out in front of his house next to the Forestdale Church saying, "Boats to let, Clayton Burke." And there were 2 or 3 of them down in the pond, and Dad's job for, again, a quarter a week would be to go down and check the boats because they were rented by fishermen.
Oh,
So people would
sure.
come down Route 130 and knew about them. They would talk to them, okay, the boat's there. Dad's job was to make sure they were supplied with oars and oarlocks and were returned or went out in the same manner, you know, safely, and came back in one piece.
So that was Peters Pond?
Yes,
Wow, okay.
because the Burkes own that whole chunk of land behind the church. It's like a big, I don't know, 20 acres or something going right down to the pond.
They do, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Another job he had, again, we're talking the Depression.
Yep.
There were a couple of ladies, I think it was Mary Frank Fisher and her sister or two. They lived up the street where the bait shop is now in Forestdale by the Snake Pond Lights.
yep.
And one of the sisters was a special needs lady that would occasionally run off. And Jet Crocker, Alvin Crocker's father, would always seem to find her, I guess. And he would put her in a car and bring her back. And Dad always remembered she barely, because she wasn't used to cars.
Yes.
She would just be peering over the window. She was scared. But Dad would go up, and the ladies had a very small store. Mm-hmm. And one of Dad's jobs was to go empty chamber pots for the ladies, you know, out in the outhouse, I
Yeah,
guess.
sure they had out, yeah.
Right. So it was like, I remember one time he told me he was working for either Alvin Crocker or John Coe, 2 old-time Forestdale guys.
Yeah.
And he thought he didn't get poison ivy, so he stripped down to his waist, you know, in the outside, and he got so much poison ivy because, of course, he was clearing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
So-
boy, yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what kind of treatment they had back then for poison ivy.
He said basically he had to just lie on the bed
Oh,
with like maybe a
gosh.
sheet over him at the most because he was just one big mass of poison ivy.
God bless it. You mentioned a store.
Yes.
And tell me about the DeLong store, your Nana DeLong.
Well, Nana DeLong used the front of her house as a store, a post office, and a gas station. And so you could buy, you know, you'd come up and get the mail, which is a tiny little office, you know, not much bigger than a closet because, you know, Forestdale was probably less than 100 people, you know.
Yeah.
So you weren't getting lots of mail. And then the rest of you could buy at the store. And out front, on facing Route 130, there was a porch with an ice chest. And Dad would always say that's so you could go up and get a tonic, meaning, of course, a
tonic.
Coke or something like
That's
that.
what they called it in those days.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there was a 2-pump gas station. And in front, people get their gasoline.
They did, yeah.
And there's actually a little tiny movie of it. If you go to, look up on YouTube, you look up 1946 Cape Cod brush fires.
Oh, yes.
And there was a big brush fire, and the state made a 2-part movie out of it with subtitles, with maps, with lots of action, but no noise. And Dad had told me when I was a kid that my great uncle Charles had moved the church, not the church bus, the bus that he ran, up the street to park it behind the DeLong house because there's a big field. And they thought the fire was going to burn the church down, which was still the little church on that side.
Yes.
And great-grandma's house, and so he parked it out back. And Dad had told me the story. And there's a little snippet at around 5 minutes of the first film where you see a quick shot of the store, the bus turning into it, and smoke, and you can just see a little bit of
Just
my
see-
house in the background. It's pretty cool.
Would you mention that again for people that might be listening and have an interest?
Yes, you look up 1946 Cape Cod brush fires
Okay.
on YouTube, and it's a 2-parter. Again, it's captioned, and you'll see some of Sandwich, like the Grange Hall and all that.
Oh, yes.
But it's that whole area. But if you look at around 5 minutes or so into the first one, you'll see this little quick shot of a yellow school bus pulling in, and that's the old, you'll see the gas pumps, you'll see great-grandpa's old Model A, you'll see the store.
Isn't it just wonderful that, you know, for this particularly, you've heard the story, your dad told you, and you actually can see, you know, you have proof that, gosh, this really did happen. Look, here it is right here.
It really surprised me that
Yes.
that one story would pop out.
Yes.
Dad had told me, and you know, Dad would tell me, for example, when I was a kid, he said, you know, when the old timers wanted to get rid of cars, they would just drive them on the ponds, like Snake Pond, Peters Pond, and when the ice went out, the car went down.
Oh, no.
And I was talking with someone who scuba dived in Snake Pond a number of years ago,
Yes.
and they said they found the remains of both a Ford Model TRA and a Studebaker in the bottom of Snake Pond.
Isn't that something?
So if you think that's a shallow pond, it makes you
Yes.
wonder what's in Peters Pond or Wakeby Pond or any of the ponds.
Yes, that perhaps was a typical way, as you say, of getting rid of, you know, besides sticking it out in your backyard, of really getting
Which was
rid
done
of it.
commonly too.
Right.
I remember growing
right.
up, there was what's now Joe J. Lane was a dirt road to Herb Weaver's house and the Cry family. And at the end of it, where the old Peters Pond wood road crossed it, there was an old Pontiac. There was not much left of it. And where the Forestdale School was, there was an old car out in the woods there. I only saw it once in the middle of nowhere because the wood road had grown up.
Yeah.
Just all rust.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They didn't think anything of it. You've mentioned a few of the old timers as we've been talking about these stories. If I mention a couple of them that we haven't talked about, perhaps you could tell me a little more. What about Raymond Gavoni?
Well, Raymond Gavoni was one of the people who lived in South Sandwich. Now, back then, South Sandwich had very few people out there.
Yes.
I mean, it was, you know, my school bus back then was owned by Clarence Van Buskirk, and it was a 3/4 size school bus, usually driven by Bobby Weaver, who was known as a taxidermist. And it covered all of South Sandwich and Forestdale with no problem.
Yeah.
But we would always go by Raymond Gavoni's house, and Raymond lived on, the house is gone now, but he had a little white concrete house. He didn't have any running water or anything, and he was a caretaker in Osterville. You know, he always had a station wagon, I remember, full of lawnmowers. You know, that was, back then landscapers were, you know, you would have been kept busy working for the wealthier people.
Of course,
and so,
yes.
anyway, my Uncle Malcolm Burke was, of course, going to work on a Saturday one day as a carpenter, and he was driving down Farmersville Road, and he said, and Raymond was out, you know, mowing his lawn. He didn't have any clothes on, but, you know, his... So Uncle Malcolm always said he thought Raymond was taking a Saturday morning air bath.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
We've mentioned a couple times water and cisterns and the ponds. I'm going to take just a second here. I was reading an article done by John Cullity.
Yep.
He used to write an article for our local papers called Cedarville Journal.
Yep.
And it just seems to fit in very well with, because I'm going to be asking you some questions afterwards. But John is Sanders native, goes back generations for those that don't know. He is a noted sandwich historian, a great storyteller.
Oh yeah, no, I like John. I've known him a long time.
Yes, and just a lovely, lovely person.
Yep.
So I'm going to read just a couple sentences in his article that appeared in the newspaper quite a few years ago. It says, although Forestdale, the land was very fertile, and that attests to the fact of all the farms, John was saying, and I'll quote here, there was one serious problem with living in the highest village on Cape Cod. Every home and farm needed a water supply, but groundwater was a long ways down. Prior to the arrival of deep-dilled electrically pumped water, was stored in or underground tanks. Cisterns resembled wells in that a bucket on a rope was lowered to get the water, though hand pumps were also used. And he also mentioned, which I did not know, and I think it's so interesting, so I'm just going to quickly mention this, that Forestdale is an average of 150 feet above sea level. It is the highest village on Cape Cod, and Snake Pond in the neighborhood, as we know, is at 68 feet above sea level, the highest pond on the Cape.
Right, yep.
Never knew that until I
Yeah.
read John's article.
I am the same. I was looking at that John's article a year or two ago, and I
Yes.
found the same thing. I was like,
Oh, now we understand.
Yep.
So tell me about the cisterns that people needed to get, and how did they get their water from the pond?
well, Dad told me when I was a kid how next door at great-grandpa's old house, which at that time was owned by my great-uncle Charles and his wife Aunt Florence.
Okay.
But when Grandpa Burke owned it, Clayton and Nellie Burke, they had a cistern, which I don't know if it's still there or not because the barn fell down years ago. But that's where they would get a lot of their water. You know, it would come down the barn roof, then it would go, I guess, through the gutters into the cistern. And of course, any particles or bird poop or anything that got picked up would settle to the bottom. So then they felt they could drink it or whatever, you know.
Sure.
My grandfather also would use some of it and make a slurry with chicken manure to put around like blueberry bushes and things like that.
To help them grow.
And Gerald Fish, who was I think he was a special needs guy. He lived with great-grandpa and Grandpa DeLong next door with the store.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, he had a horse that he loved named Old Dick. And I remember seeing a picture of him that great-aunt Florence took driving Old Dick down 130, which was a paved road, with like 2 to 4 big barrels in the back going to Snake Pond. So they would go to Snake Pond, and I don't know if he actually drove the wagon into the water and just let the water flow over them.
Okay.
Or because I can't see how he would have been able to do it otherwise.
Yeah.
And then he would bring it back, which gave them water probably for the potatoes they were growing maybe, or whatever reasons, and I'm sure they had a cistern too.
Would other people use him to get their supply of water from the pond?
That I don't know.
Okay, but your family certainly did.
Yes, the DeLong family
Yes.
did. And in fact, the house that I now live in, I think, was owned by his mom and Gerald. And I've always kind of felt, and again, I may be wrong, that she left the house to the DeLongs because they would take care of Gerald for her.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes, that really sort of makes sense, doesn't it?
Right, I think so.
Yes. Okay. Let's talk about how your dad and your mom met, and talk a little about that.
Okay. The Block side of the family, which is my mom's side.
Her maiden name was Block.
Block, right. Elizabeth Freeman Block. They had moved, the family was from Norway originally. So they were like the second, third generation kids, I guess. They were living in Brockton, and around the turn of the century from 1800 to 1900, so it'd been 1900, 1901, right around then, they moved to Forestdale. And they had quite a few kids too. But I know that Mom said one of the children died while they're in Forestdale, and it was a time of not the best economic situation. So they finally decided to move back to Brockton because things weren't working out. But Grandpa Block, my grandfather, Walter Block, always remembered how the Burkes helped them. You know, like when they needed firewood, again, one of the basics, the Burkes helped them. And the
Sure.
Burkes had not a lot of money either at that point. You know,
Themselves,
obviously, they were just
yes.
regular folks. So my grandfather decided he wanted to start coming to the Cape back around, I want to say like 1935.
Okay.
So I think the first year they stayed at Cedarville. Now, my grandfather was quite a character. So he had 4 kids, my mom and her 2 older brothers, older sister. He would pack them up on an old Hudson 4-door sedan. He would take Jackie the dog, put him in a box, and tie him onto the running board.
Oh, no.
And he would tie a couple of spare tires, which everybody needed back then.
Sure.
And Mom always said they were going through Providence on the way to the Cape. And Grandpa had just used some old clothesline. And all of a sudden, a tire went bouncing by him. And they realized that the clothesline had rotted out. And so the tire fell off and just went by the car.
Oh, no.
So they got there the first year. Mom said, in fact, they heard a big explosion the first morning they were there, and one of the old tires, the tube had expanded and blown out. This is in Cedarville. But then they started coming to Forestdale, and the kids met for the first time. So you had my dad, Harold, better known as Lou, my dad Lou, and Malcolm and his sister Ruth. Uncle Jim was quite a bit younger at that time. He was more like 5 years old, you know, in 1935. And then you had Walter Block, Jim Block, Lucille Block, and Betty Block, who's my mom. So they were all kind of shy at first, especially the guys, but my great uncle Henry Burke took them on I want to say like a cookout to the beach. Back then it was a picnic.
Sure.
And the 4 boys all started hitting it off. And so they all started hanging out. They would come down. They actually built a little cottage down on Peters Pond. Great Grandma Burke rented them the land for 5 years.
Oh my God.
She didn't want to sell it at the time.
So these were kids,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what they would do is they would play together, and they would play kick the can. They would play sardines. And then when the Model T got going, they'd all go places.
Sure.
Pardon me. And Dad said they would drive to the canal where the base is. They could drive on a wood road and overlook the canal and watch the New York to Boston boat go by. People were dancing, big band music, and all that.
Really? Because it's so high. Again,
Right.
it's so high.
Right,
They could
and
see
it was just a wood road. There was no base.
Sure.
And Dad said they all really got along. Great Uncle Ralph and Aunt Margaret lived up at the Snake Pond Road intersection, and they had a player piano. So they would go there on a rainy day, and there were 3 kids in there, 3 girls, all their age. So they'd all hang out together. They'd go swimming in Peters Pond, Snake Pond, but they would get the player piano going, and they'd all, rainy day. All right, let's put this roll in and have it
Yeah.
go. But one of the classic stories is there was a gentleman who lived sort of. It's the house that Frank Guilfoyle owned until recently, so it's sort of kitty corner across the street from Joe J. Lane.
Okay.
It's still there. It's quite close to Route
On
130.
Route 130, yeah.
And there was a gentleman named Mr. Bumpus that lived there. And so the Burke and Blocks one night got a wallet and put it in the road in Route 130. They knew they knew he was away. They knew he was coming home. They put the wallet and they tied a black string to it.
Oh.
So he came home and, of course, stopped probably in Route 130 or pulled into the yard. There's very little traffic. And he went to get it. And, of course, they were hiding in the woods. So the minute he went to reach down, they yanked it away from him. Now, this is at night. Of course, he doesn't have a flashlight or anything. But he says, "It's you, Burke and Block kids. I know it. I know it." So he complained to Grandpa Burke.
Oh, boy.
Next day. Now, Grandpa, again, stern old New England, and he said, "What do you want me to do about it?" It's like,
Yeah.
right. So they didn't, they weren't known as vandals or anything, but Dad did say that Dad and Uncle Malcolm and Uncle Jim Block and Uncle Walt Block called themselves the 4 Buccos. Buccos. And they loved the Model T, and so they went all over the place with it, but like they wanted to be, they were trying to, kids that age, they decided they were going to make cigarettes. And they knew they couldn't really get them, so they made them out of grape leaves and smoked them behind Great Grandpa Burke's house. I'm kind of like, I can't imagine that would have been a great experience.
No. Oh my. So that's how obviously your mom and dad met.
Yes.
When did they get married?
Well, they didn't get married. Walter reminded me lately, I hadn't heard the story, but
your brother
my
Walter.
brother Walter
Yep.
had said that Dad actually, they got married in '54, but Dad had asked Mom to marry him about 8 years before that.
Wow.
And of course, Dad had come home that's 1946.
Sure.
Dad had come home from World War II, went back to work for my grandfather, and then out at the base eventually as a carpenter. She wasn't sure. So by then my grandfather's family, the Blocks, had moved to Norwich, Connecticut.
Okay.
And she went and lived with my great aunt in Manassas, Virginia, and taught a little bit in Connecticut, but also worked for the CIA in Washington, the beginning CIA.
Say that again?
I know, isn't that funny? This teacher who
worked for
actually worked, but she was very good about it. She never said much of anything. She's like, "I can't tell you about it." Of course, being kids, when she did finally tell us, we told everybody, "Oh, my mom worked for the CIA," right?
Yeah, the whole town. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'll be darned.
Yes. So
because she was a school teacher at that point, was she not?
she was. What happened was she taught part-time in Connecticut. She had gone to Perry Normal School in Boston, which now is a different name. I can't even remember what the college is now.
Sure.
And then I can't remember if she worked for the CIA first or worked for and again, not for a long time, But when Dad asked her to marry him, she, of course, had 3 kids and raised them. She started part-time teaching as a permanent substitute in the Sandwich schools. And then the superintendent of schools encouraged her to get her full degree. She could have, if she had taught in Massachusetts before 1950, she wouldn't have had to do all this stuff because she already was qualified in Connecticut, but she did. And she was the first kindergarten teacher in Mashpee. And she taught with Pat DeCanto. They were good friends and used to go
Oh.
co-hogging together and stuff. And I was friends with the family too, my friend
Yes.
Dave in high school, you know.
Mrs. DeCanto, lovely
Yeah,
lady.
yeah, great lady.
Oh, I'll be down. So, they're married,
Yep,
3 boys.
yep,
They are yourself.
right. And my surviving brother Walter, and then Stephen, the youngest, who died several years ago.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So you went to the Sandwich school system.
I did.
Tell me a little bit about that. How did you get there? Who were your friends?
Yep.
Do you remember any stories about your years at Sandwich High School? Or
Well-
even elementary school, yes.
Well, of course, a lot of people tend to forget, because we moved to Connecticut when I was 6 for a year and a half, for a job opportunity with my father, with my grandfather Block, who sold office supplies. But unfortunately, Grandpa Block was coming down with cancer. And that just didn't work out. You know, there wasn't really room for another salesman, so we came back. So a lot of people forget that I actually missed first grade and a little over half of second grade at Sandwich High School, at Sandwich Elementary School. So we went on to become, we did the usual. I was a soccer player, so I played soccer all the way through elementary and high school. But 2 of my friends, Dave DeCanto was a good friend of mine. We were soccer players together. And 2 of my other friends were John Cornelius and Ted Titcomb. And of course, everybody knows Titcomb's bookstore.
Yes.
And Ted, in fact, was welding the colonial figure that stands out in front of the building. He welded that in art class in 1972 and 73.
He did.
Yep.
So that was the art class at the Sandwich High School.
Yes.
He actually did that then. Yeah, okay.
But we were also the model rocket guys. And Steve Gorley might have done a little bit too. You know, he went on to do a lot of really secret stuff for the Air Force. He was a brilliant kid. Retired now, but Ted and I and John would fire off model rockets, Estes model rockets. And back then, I still lived in the house in Forestdale next to the old potato field. So you didn't need any permission. You'd order them, and I'd go up to the post office, and Gladys Scavone I'd order them by mail order, being 12, 13. So when we were older, probably around 16 or 17, we were still shooting them off, but we would shoot them off down at the baseball field behind the wing school.
Oh, you would?
Yes.
Yeah.
So like back then, you had one rocket that actually had a movie camera in it. And we shot it off out back, but it was so fast, you saw someone's foot and then the sky, because they just were up quick.
Yeah.
But this was kind of funny. We lost a rocket one day, and it went up, the parachute deployed, but it was windy. And we thought we'd allowed for shooting in the wind, but the wind carried it off towards Sandwich. We're like, oh, okay.
There's the end of that.
Yeah, it was a Saturday. So Monday we came into school, and Randy Lewis, who was one of Dr. Lewis's children, walked up to us with a model rocket. And he handed it to us and he said, "You're the only guys I know who shoot these off," and it ended up in his backyard.
No, because that's not that close.
No.
Dr. Lewis lived on Main Street.
Right,
Yeah.
it carried all the way in the wind.
I'll
we
be darned.
we should have aimed more toward the base, and
Yes.
we didn't, and it just whoop.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Your interest, your father's interest in old cars,
Yes.
Model Ts.
Yep.
I think he gave that interest to you, did he not? Can you talk a little about your interest with old cars?
Well, the thing I like is, my family have always been car guys. And my uncle Walt Block, when he had 3 kids, and the middle boy was a boy, 2 girls and a boy, John. And he and John had restored a couple of Model A's together. And John's natural gift was mechanics. So
yeah.
he's always been a big help to me, and he and my cousins Ed and Jim Dreisch and Tom Block would come down and stay with us when they got older, when they were like 18, 19, 20. And they would hang out in the garage. Of course, we're welcome to have them, and they could do whatever they wanted.
Sure.
But they were always coming down in like MG Midgets and Austin Healey Minis and Alfa Romeo convertibles.
All the sports cars.
Yeah, yeah.
Whoa.
And so that side of the family was always doing stuff like that. And so I had this I like cars. And what was good, though, was Dad probably would have liked to have an old car. He'd talk about it occasionally, but he had 3 boys growing up.
Sure.
When we moved to Connecticut, when I was 5, he sold Great-Grandpa Burke's old Model A, a rumble seat coupe, because he needed the money.
He
sold
probably
it for
hated
$60.
to do that, yeah.
I remember watching a Hot Rod Club bought it in Bourne. So probably about 20, 25 years ago, my brother Walter, who's a real gearhead, spotted a Model A for sale for $2,800 in one of these swap magazines, car magazines. And he went and looked at it with Walter and the family, and they decided they would buy it. So we restored it, and so for the last 15 years of his life, Dad was able to drive the Model A. He would drive in the Osterville Days Parade, but that was it. He wasn't a parade guy.
Yeah.
But he'd go to the bank with it. He would go to the dump with it. He got a dump sticker for it.
He did.
And he'd take Mom. He never failed to take Mom. It wasn't like, this is my hobby, go away.
Yeah. That was like a dream come true for him.
It was.
Yes.
And
How wonderful you and Walter did that.
Yes, Walt did a great paint job on it. And it's Walter's car now.
Okay. Oh, it is. Oh,
yes.
so you kept it in the family.
Right, yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and it's still, very original in terms of, it's got the same type of the engine and the wheels and all that. And
Will we see Walter driving around town? Or?
Walter is very busy. He owns his own construction company.
Yes.
So demolition, septic, you name it.
Yeah.
And so he's usually out straight. So for him to find time is kind of hard.
Yeah.
So it's sitting in my garage. I have a 2-car garage.
Yeah.
So it's a little dusty, but it's plenty safe and
drivable.
Well, the thing about Model A's is they're notorious for simplicity. They were one of the first cars to have a regular 3-speed clutch, a regular gas pedal, clutch pedal and brake pedal. So it's very easy to drive when it comes to that as compared if you know how to drive a modern car with a clutch.
Yeah,
but
you can drive.
But you have to be thinking ahead, because trying to get out on Route 130 now with a car that's very slow is tricky, and the brakes, of course, are pedal. They're what you call Jack Armstrong type. When you press it to the floor, it's a bunch of interacting rods. So it's not a hydraulic brake.
Oh, so it will take a while.
It'll take longer, yes.
It'll take a while, yeah.
Right.
So you really have to anticipate.
You have to anticipate.
Yeah.
You have a slow car that needs to stop a little longer. So you have to be thinking ahead, like don't tailgate or.
Yeah, no.
And usually you have people tailgating you anyway. So.
Yeah, because you're going quite slow.
Right.
Have we? This has been wonderful. Have we missed anything? Have we missed any story that I want you to tell?
I'm trying to think of anything. I mean, there were. I've covered pretty much, I think, most of it. I will mention another funny story about Grandpa DeLong, great-grandpa DeLong. Again, living next door in the potato farm. He had a Model T. I mentioned how Skipper Ewer was towing the axle by hand. Well, Grandpa used to park it in an open shed out back. It was open to the elements. And it developed ruts where you pulled the engine in. And sometimes it would get frozen in the ruts. Or the engine would be very cold. So Grandpa used to start a fire under the engine to warm it up. Yeah, and one day my dad was in our yard, and back then there was just a little hedge between the field. Not much, I wouldn't call it a hedge, probably just a few bushes. And he heard Grandma DeLong yelling across the field, Louis, come quick. And so he went running over, and the car had actually caught fire.
Oh, no.
So the two of them, great-grandpa DeLong and Dad, threw sand all over it to put it out, smother it, which it did. And being a Model T, they just put some new wires on it and drove it again.
And off they went.
Yeah.
It is these stories which are so wonderful. And I'm thinking as you're talking, it's like how different it is now. This is why it's so great to have these stories. It really is. I'm so glad that we've met Chuck and
Super.
And we've had a chance to do this.
Yep.
So I think we'll end there. I want to thank everyone for listening in. I do want to give a plug again to the Friends of the Sandwich Town Archives. We have a wonderful website. If you go on Fosta, that's FOSTA, sandwich.com, or if you want to go into our Facebook, that's Fosta Sandwich Facebook. Thank you again, and we'll be back with another interesting story. Bye-bye.